Las Vegas built its entire identity on the promise that the party never stops. But in 2025, something changed. The floors got quieter, the shifts got shorter, and the people who keep this city running started talking. This is the story of casino workers reveal why no one is visiting. Las Vegas is empty. Part 1. The numbers behind the quiet. Las Vegas ended 2025 with 38.5 million visitors, down 7.5% from 2024, when the city hosted 41.7 million people. That drop of roughly 3 million visitors represents the first year-over-year decline in the post-COVID era, and it pushed the city's annual totals down to levels not seen since the early 2000s. The highest visitation year on record was 2016, when 42.9 million people came. Last year barely cracked 38. The numbers behind the headline figure aren't any more encouraging. Hotel occupancy averaged 80.3% for the year, down about 3.3 percentage points from 2024. Average daily room rates fell roughly 5% to around $183. Revenue per available room dropped nearly 9%. Convention attendance declined as well, coming in at around 5.7 million, still below the pre-pandemic peak of 6.6 million in 2019. Every major indicator that tourism officials use to measure the health of Las Vegas pointed in the same direction in 2025. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority described 2025 as one of the more complex operating environments the destination has navigated outside of the pandemic period. That's a carefully worded way of saying things got bad enough to require an official acknowledgement. December, traditionally one of the city's stronger months, was particularly sharp. Visitation that month fell approximately 9.2% from December 2024. Even the Formula One Las Vegas Grand Prix, which had been a marquee event in 2024, couldn't generate enough momentum to slow the year-long slide. Harry Reid International Airport posted its sharpest monthly passenger decline of 2025 in November, continuing what became 12 consecutive months of year-over-year drops in visitor numbers. In June 2025 alone, air passengers through Harry Reid were down 6.3% compared to June 2024. Revenue per available hotel room dropped nearly 14% in that same month, meaning not only were fewer people booking rooms, but the people who did come were, on average, paying less and spending less once they got there. By July 2025, the monthly decline had reached 12% compared to the same month the previous year. Airport traffic, hotel occupancy, vehicle traffic from California, all lower. For a city that runs on volume, 12 straight months of negative comparisons is not a rounding error. It's a pattern. And unlike a pandemic or a single catastrophic event, a pattern this gradual and this wide doesn't have a single cause you can point to and fix. It has several layered on top of each other over years, and each one requires a different response from a different set of people with different interests. Part 2. The workers on the floor. The people who feel a tourism slowdown most immediately are not the executives on earnings calls. They're the food runners, the housekeepers, the cocktail servers, and the utility porters whose incomes depend on a steady stream of people walking through casino doors. The casinos are empty, said Brian Torres Sauzo, a food runner at the Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino. There's a lot of fear for people, not just where I work, but friends who work in other casinos, just how little work there's been, and what that means long-term for them. Sharon Beckworth, who works in housekeeping at Harrah's, described the uncertainty that comes with fewer occupied rooms. Some days you're sick, you're tired, you're stressed, but you still got to work through that, she said. You got to do what you got to do to keep your job because you don't know what's gonna happen. Caesars employee Sonia Owens told a local Las Vegas news outlet that she hadn't been called in for a shift in 2 months, despite being on the schedule as on-call. Bills backed up, she said, and I just got to find something permanent. This isn't a story of people being fired. It's a story of people being technically employed but functionally idle. present on a roster, absent from the schedule. Larry Turner, a utility porter at the Four Queens Hotel and Casino, put it in plain terms. The city used to draw buses full of European tourists. "You don't see them buses like that no more," he said. Torres Souzo and Beckworth are both members of the Culinary Union Local 226, which represents 60,000 hotel and casino workers across Nevada. Union leaders have been watching these developments closely. In 2025 alone, the union's grievance team processed over 3,870 grievances and won $14.1 million for workers. Numbers that reflect how many hours were being cut, how many shifts were being rescheduled on short notice, and how many workers were fighting to be made whole for work they'd lost. Secretary-Treasurer Ted Papageorge added another layer of concern that goes beyond visitor numbers: federal immigration enforcement activity. If there were 2,000 federal agents running around breaking down doors, he said, "I think folks would decide not to come to Las Vegas. It would be crippling for our economy. The workers who serve the tourists are, in many cases, the same communities that aggressive immigration enforcement would most directly affect. The anxiety in the industry runs in more than one direction. Tourism supports more than 30% of Southern Nevada's gross domestic product. When the floors are quiet, the ripple moves outward fast, into the restaurant staffing levels, the taxi and rideshare queues, the retail vendors, the entertainment venues, the entire service ecosystem that only exists because millions of people show up expecting to be taken care of." Part 3. The Canadian Problem. The single largest contributing factor to Las Vegas's 2025 decline was one that the city had essentially no control over. Canada stopped coming. Canada and Mexico together accounted for over 50% of all international visitors to Las Vegas in 2024. Canada alone sent approximately 1.4 million visitors that year. In 2025, those numbers dropped sharply. Estimates put the Canadian decline at around 20%. Airline capacity between Las Vegas and Canadian cities fell by approximately 35%, hitting its lowest level since 2006. The cause wasn't a natural disaster or a health scare, it was politics. Trade disputes between the United States and Canada, combined with rhetoric from the Trump administration that many Canadians found hostile, including suggestions about annexing Canada as the 51st state, created a sentiment among Canadian travelers that visiting the United States amounted to endorsing the situation. The boycott was informal, personal, and remarkably consistent. Statistics Canada reported that Canadian return trips from the United States by car fell 35% in April 2025 compared to April 2024. Air travel was down nearly 20% in the same comparison. By September 2025, Canadians taking road trips into the US were still down 35% year over year, the 9th consecutive month of steep declines. WestJet, the major Canadian airline, cut summer flights to numerous US destinations. Montreal-based Air Transat announced it would stop operating flights to Florida entirely for the summer season. Steve Hill, the president of the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, addressed it directly. "Some of the decisions our administration has made around international relations have caused a drop in tourism," he said. Coming from the head of a tourism authority, that kind of statement carries weight. Rick Harrison, of gold and silver pawnshop fame, the downtown Las Vegas fixture made famous by television, was characteristically straightforward when speaking to reporters. "I'd say probably 40 to 50% of the people I get are international," he said, acknowledging that the city simply wasn't getting as many visitors as it once did. The European picture wasn't much better. Denmark saw visitors to the US fall 19% by mid-2025, in part due to anger over American rhetoric about Greenland. Countries, including the United Kingdom and Germany, issued updated travel advisories for the United States. French package holiday sales to the US dropped 14.6% between November 2024 and October 2025. International visitors had accounted for about 12% of Las Vegas's total visitors in 2024. a number that seems small but represents a highly valuable segment of the visitor population, as international tourists tend to stay longer and spend more per visit than domestic day trippers. Derek Stevens, CEO of Circa Resort and Casino, one of the newer downtown Vegas properties, addressed the Canadian situation directly. "I think everyone is in a position where you can say we're missing some of our Canadian friends who aren't visiting this year." That's a measured way to describe a 20% drop in one of the city's most reliable international markets. Missing suggests temporary. The data suggested something more dug in. The U.S. Travel Association projected that the country would lose somewhere between $12.5 and $15 billion in international visitor spending in 2025, making the United States the only major economy out of 184 countries to see a decline in international tourism revenue that year. Las Vegas, as the country's highest-profile entertainment destination, absorbed a disproportionate share of that loss. Part 4, a city that priced itself out. The international decline explains part of 2025's downturn, but the other part is something the casinos did entirely to themselves over roughly 15 years, with full awareness of what they were doing. Las Vegas was built on a specific mythology. The city where you could fly in cheap, stay somewhere glamorous for almost nothing, eat at a buffet the size of an aircraft hangar, drink for free while you gambled, and come home having lost your $300 at the blackjack table without feeling genuinely robbed. That mythology was partly marketing and partly real. The economics of Las Vegas were, for a long time, genuinely oriented toward making the average American feel like they could afford to live large for a weekend. That model began to erode around 2005 when resort fees first appeared. Resort fees are mandatory daily charges added on top of the room rate, not optional, not based on what amenities you actually use, and, until a Federal Trade Commission rule passed in May 2025, not always disclosed prominently when you booked. By 2025, most strip hotels were charging between $35 and $55 per night in resort fees, plus the Clark County room tax of 13.38% on top of that. A $49 resort fee actually costs $56.68 after tax. A 3-night stay at a cheap strip hotel quietly adds $120 to $180 to the bill before you've ordered your first drink. A $49 per night advertised room rate can easily land at $88 to $104 per night once fees are factored in. And most booking platforms were showing only the base rate until the FTC stepped in. The buffets went too. The all-you-can-eat buffets that had been a cornerstone of the Las Vegas value proposition for generations. The Bacchanal at Caesars, the buffet at the Bellagio, the endless spread at the MGM Grand were closed during COVID, and most never came back. A tradition that had made visitors feel pampered for $20 was quietly discontinued, and in its place came elevated dining experiences with celebrity chef branding and $60 entrees. The symbolism was not subtle. Then the parking went. Las Vegas casinos had offered free parking to visitors for essentially their entire history. It was part of the social contract, the understanding that the building would take your money inside and at least not charge you to walk in the door. MGM Resorts began charging for parking in 2016. Other major operators followed. By 2025, self-parking at major strip properties costs $20 to $25 depending on the day of the week, and valet runs $40. The free drinks, another institution so central to the Las Vegas experience that it had its own mythology, became harder to access too. Cocktail service has always operated on the understanding that if you're gambling, drinks come to you. As machine gambling replaced table gambling as the dominant format, service slowed. The average slot player now waits significantly longer for a cocktail than they would have 20 years ago. And in some areas of the larger casinos, the density of servers per square foot has thinned to the point where free drinks require enough patience to not feel free at all. Nobody made an announcement. The perk just quietly receded. MGM raised its resort fees twice in 2024 alone, first in January, then again in December, hiking luxury properties like Bellagio, Aria, and the Cosmopolitan to $55 per night. Resorts World raised its resort fee to $55 in March 2025. The fees kept climbing through one of the sharpest visitor declines the city had ever recorded, which is either remarkable resilience or remarkable tone deafness, depending on your point of view. I think it's clear that value has been a concern on the part of some of our customers. LVCVA CEO Steve Hill acknowledged at a press conference. We're aware of that, the resorts are aware of that. Caesars CEO Thomas Rieg, asked about pricing during his company's third-quarter earnings call, offered a somewhat dizzying response. We price hundreds, thousands of items across Vegas every day, from obviously rooms and restaurants to ATM fees to everything that you purchase in Vegas. And we're constantly adjusting them. ATM fees, they're adjusting ATM fees, and they want to know why people stopped coming. Part 5. What they did to the games. The resort fees and parking charges are visible costs, irritating but legible. What happened to the casino floor itself is subtler, and for the kind of visitor who actually came to Las Vegas to gamble, considerably more corrosive. For most of the 20th century, the standard blackjack payout for hitting a natural, an ace, and a 10 value card was 3-2. Bet $10, hit blackjack, win $15. Simple, fair, and consistent with the idea that the house has an edge, but you're getting a reasonably honest game. Around 2005, casinos began introducing a new payout structure. 6-5. Same bet, same blackjack, but now you win $12 instead of $15. That $3 difference might sound trivial. It isn't. The shift from 3-2 to 6-5 blackjack nearly quadruples the house's edge on that payout, from roughly 0.5% under basic strategy to nearly 1.9%. Over the course of a session, you lose significantly more money, more quickly, in ways that don't announce themselves loudly enough for casual players to notice until after the fact. By 2020, only 38 casinos in the greater Las Vegas market offered 3-2 blackjack tables with a $5 minimum. By 2025, that number had dropped to 6. 6 casinos in a city whose identity is built around gambling. Strip properties now almost universally deal 6-5 at lower limit tables, and $25 minimum bets during slower periods have become standard at many places that used to welcome $5 players. On busy nights, $50 minimums aren't unusual. 000 roulette, a version of the game that adds a third house number, increasing the house edge to 7.69% compared to the 2.7% of single zero European roulette, appeared at some strip properties and drew immediate backlash from anyone who understood what it meant. Single zero roulette wheels, the more player-friendly version, became increasingly rare on the main casino floor, often retreating into high-limit areas where they could charge premium minimums for the privilege of better odds. The mythology of Las Vegas had always accepted that the house wins in the long run. Experienced gamblers knew this and came anyway because the experience, the free drinks, the low minimums, the 3-2 blackjack, the atmosphere of an honest hustle was worth the cost of admission. When the casinos quietly changed the terms of that bargain while keeping the aesthetic, something broke. Not loudly, not all at once, but consistently enough that the kind of gambler who used to come back every year started doing the math and finding other things to do. A single zero roulette wheel, the European version, with a house edge of 2.7% rather than the 5.26% of American double zero roulette, was described by one reporter who visited the Strip in 2025 as ultra-rare, like finding the last surviving example of a nearly extinct species. It existed, technically, in one high-limit room, not on the main floor where the $25 minimum players were depositing their vacation budgets, but tucked away where the $200 minimum players could enjoy the marginally better odds they were paying a premium to access. That particular architectural detail of the modern Strip says quite a lot about who the business is, now organized around. Part 6. The Gaming Revenue Paradox. Here is the strange thing. While Las Vegas was losing visitors at a historic rate, the casinos were setting revenue records. Nevada's casinos won $15.8 billion from gamblers in 2025, a new annual record, up 1.2% from the previous record set in 2024. Downtown Las Vegas casinos posted their own new annual high, generating over $951 million. Strip gaming revenue came in at $8.82 billion, essentially flat from 2024, but still among the highest figures ever recorded. So, 3.1 million fewer visitors, and more money extracted from the ones who came. This is not a coincidence. It is a strategy. By raising table minimums, worsening payout odds, adding resort fees, and generally shifting the visitor mix toward higher spending guests, the major casino operators engineered a situation in which they could generate record revenue from a shrinking crowd. For the shareholders, this probably looked like success. For the food runners, housekeepers, cocktail servers, and taxi drivers whose incomes depend on raw volume, it looked like something else. Gaming revenue going up while the number of people walking through the doors goes down means the average guest is being relieved of more money per visit, which is exactly what higher minimums, worse blackjack odds, and mandatory fees are designed to accomplish. The Strip didn't get richer despite the slowdown. It got richer partly because of how it responded to pressure by squeezing harder. Jonathan Jossel, CEO of the Plaza Hotel and Casino downtown, articulated the challenge plainly. Las Vegas maybe's forgotten some of the messaging, which is to say, it's not just an event town, and people can still come here and have a great time at a great price point. He was describing a city that had, in his view, confused hosting expensive events with being a compelling everyday destination. The Super Bowl came to Las Vegas in 2024. Formula One came in 2023 and 2024. These are enormous draws that distort the baseline. Once you subtract those one-time influxes of spending, the underlying picture is of a place that has been slowly pricing out the repeat visitor in favor of the spectacle seeker. MGM Resorts CEO Bill Hornbuckle, speaking at a business event, pushed back on any suggestion of crisis. The reality is, occupancy is down 3% and visitation is down, he acknowledged, then added, "We are as solid as a rock. I read headlines that Las Vegas is dead. Stop, Las Vegas is not dead." But when you're quoting record casino revenues in the same breath as describing your lowest visitor totals in over 20 years, you have decided something about who you're for. And the people who used to drive in from California or fly in from Vancouver aren't necessarily feeling included in that decision. The Strip's model has quietly shifted from casting a wide net to fishing with a spear. Fewer guests, higher yield per guest, and a growing assumption that the visitors who can't afford the new terms will simply be replaced by those who can. So far, the replacement hasn't fully materialized. Part 7. The Sale Nobody Asked For. In September of 2025, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority launched a destination-wide promotional initiative they called the Fabulous 5-Day Sale. Hotels, restaurants, shows, and resorts across the city offered discounted deals in an organized attempt to lure back visitors who had drifted away. Some properties cut rates by up to 33%. Resorts, World and Sahara temporarily eliminated resort fees entirely and offered free parking, which, given that Resorts World had just raised its resort fee to $55 in March of that same year, was a notable about-face. Others bundled dining credits and spa vouchers into packages aimed at budget-conscious travelers. The Luxor, one of the Strip's most iconic properties and one that had been participating in the promotional effort, was part of a concerted push to signal that Las Vegas still had something to offer the middle-income visitor who had started to feel unwelcome. The messaging across the campaign, "Come back, we'll make it worth your while," was functionally an admission that the city had, at some point, stopped being worth it without the incentive. It worked somewhat. The fall showed modest improvement in some booking categories, but the optics of the thing were hard to miss. The city that had spent years aggressively raising every fee and charge it could think of was now running sales events to remind people it still wanted them to come. The Federal Trade Commission added another layer of context in May 2025, when it passed a new rule requiring hotels to disclose the full cost of a stay, including resort fees, upfront before booking was complete. The rule was, in effect, an acknowledgement that a widespread and legal form of pricing deception had been taking place, and that the government had decided to put a stop to it. Vegas had been advertising $49 rooms that cost $90 by the time checkout arrived, and regulators finally noticed. Several properties started offering all-inclusive packages that eliminated resort fees for guests who asked, attempting to compete on clarity rather than fine print. The Plaza Hotel, under Josel's leadership, had been offering fee-inclusive packages even before the broader market shift, and they were selling. John Smallwood, the president of Travel Outlook, a company that fields incoming phone calls for approximately 300 hotels and casinos nationwide, reported a 25% drop in call volume across the industry, a real-time signal of how broadly the slowdown was registering. "This administration has an arrogance about it," he said, attributing a portion of the decline to how the United States was presenting itself to the world. And that offends people that aren't from here. Part 8. Where things stand. Las Vegas is not collapsing. The infrastructure is still there. The brand still carries weight globally, and the events calendar for 2026 remains strong. The FIFA World Cup is being co-hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico in 2026, which Las Vegas hopes will drive a meaningful recovery in international visitation. The city is also positioning itself to benefit from continued investment in non-gaming amenities, entertainment residencies, sports venues, the Sphere, restaurant concepts that broaden the appeal beyond the casino floor. But the workers who actually run this city are living the present tense, not the projection. 3 million fewer visitors in a single year means fewer rooms to clean, fewer tables to run food from, fewer cocktail orders to fill, fewer parking spaces to manage. When the convention floor is steady, but the leisure visitor base shrinks, the people who benefit from the convention business and the people who depend on the walk-in tourist are not the same people. Convention attendees have prearranged schedules, expense accounts, and meals paid for by their companies. The casual visitor spending money at a restaurant on their own dime is a very different economic engine, and that's the one that's been running slower. The mythology of Las Vegas as the place where every American could afford to feel like a high roller. All-day buffets, $5 blackjack, free drinks, cheap rooms, comps for anyone with a player's card took decades to build. It is not something that can be rebuilt with a 5-day sale or a temporary waiver on resort fees. What the casino workers on the floor understand, and what the executives on earnings calls seem to be only beginning to absorb, is that the bargain Las Vegas made with its visitors was always about more than price. It was about the experience of being wanted, of walking through a door and feeling like the city was glad you came, regardless of how much you had in your wallet. When fees multiply, minimums rise, odds worsen, and every amenity acquires a surcharge, the city is sending a different message, and the people who used to love hearing the original one are starting to listen. Professor Anthony Lucas of UNLV, a former gaming industry executive, put it plainly when assessing 2025's numbers. Las Vegas suffered in 2025 from the reality that international travel to the US became less desirable, especially in critical feeder markets such as Canada. That's the external piece. The internal piece, the decade of fee increases, odds manipulation, and parking charges, is a self-inflicted wound layered on top of it. Neither problem is simple to fix, and they're being fixed, if at all, at very different speeds. The casinos that trimmed resort fees did so temporarily and conditionally. The 6 to 5 blackjack tables are still dealing, and the workers between shifts are still watching the clock, waiting to find out if tomorrow's schedule will have their name on it. Las Vegas will adapt. It always has. The city has survived bigger shocks than a bad year for tourism, but the version of Vegas that's coming out of 2025 is one where the people who built its reputation, the repeat visitors, the middle-income gamblers, the Canadian snowbirds, the bus tours from the Midwest, feel less welcome than they used to. The workers who depend on that crowd know it. And now, so do you. If this video was worth your time, hit like and subscribe. There's more coming.